Find and learn from people who lived it wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from people who lived it.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Hi, beautiful people. So my name is Debbie Zita. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. Very happy to be here. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. What story are you here to share today?
Story of resilience.
Who do you hope hears this?
More to come. I hope past versions of me and any man or woman who is sitting in a place where they're experiencing hopelessness, despair, overwhelm, and anxiety.
Brilliant. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. I am Matthew, and I'm so excited to have Debbie Zita on the show today. Dr. David Lycan is experiencing a couple of technical difficulties. He will be joining us momentarily, but let me explain, Debbie, where and how I discovered you. I was going through my LinkedIn feed or my Instagram feed one day, and I happened to pop on this woman that I follow, Cortney McDermott. You know about her?
I love Cortney. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And so I pop on and I watch this video, and she's sharing this story with you about the jewels. You remember this?
Yes.
And I was like, this is one of the most powerful things that I have heard in a long time. And I could tell that it totally resonated with you as well.
Yes.
And so what I did was I said to my friend Cortney, I said, why don't you join us on today's podcast?
Hi guys.
And I said, we got to share this moment again with everybody because it was so incredible. So hi, Court, what's up?
Hey Matthew, I'm great. How about you two?
Hey, good.
Debbie, I'm so happy.
I'm just processing my surprise. It's so funny. I just saw on Instagram about the surprise reaction. What happens to your physical body when you go into shock and surprise? Hi, beautiful Courtney. Good to see you.
Hello, darling. Hello. It's so good to be here.
Courtney, do you mind, what was that story that you were telling her that day? Do you remember it? And are you able to recount it enough to tell it again? Is that a story you can draw on?
Sure. That's one of my favorite stories. It's really about true wealth or true riches. And it's a story about a wanderer. And he's somewhere in India. And this man runs up to him and he says, give me the stone. Will you give me the stone? And he stops and he reaches into his bag and he pulls out this stone and he says, this stone? And he says, yes, I had a dream last night. And Krishna came to me and said that if you give me that stone, I'll be the richest man in the world. And he's holding the largest diamond ever. And the mendicant, the wanderer, hands it over to him and says, here, take it. And the man runs away with the stone very greedily and keeps running. And he's so excited. And then all of a sudden he stops and he sits down and he's just pondering to himself. And then he makes his way back to the mystic and says, here, take the stone back. Can you give me the riches that made it possible for you to give this away so freely?
Yeah.
And when Debbie and I were talking on her podcast, which is such a beautiful podcast for everyone listening, when we were talking, it was like this story came up because it's the idea that true wealth is beyond, right? It's beyond the material. It's beyond anything that you can create, quote unquote, which is a whole nother story, but it's beyond all that. It's really what's inside of you and to know that those riches are there. I'm
just curious, Debbie, and Court and I talked yesterday, by the way, and cooked all this craziness up. But I was saying, I said to Courtney yesterday, I said, I guarantee when she got done recording that podcast, and I was talking about you, Debbie, I was like, she spent some time thinking about some of the things that took place on that podcast.
Oh yeah, look, I've been a seeker since I was 3. And so I've been asking those questions literally from the age of 3 and was so confused as to why no one else was kind of like playing that game with me. And so then I kind of hid all of that and then went about my life and did the usual things, and you get a job and you I was such a good girl. I did what I was told, and then my life crumbled. People passed away and all of the agendas that they had for me, it was like I was in a movie that, at least if you're in a movie that someone's watching, you can feel like you're doing it for a reason. but mum was the main person I'm speaking about, and she transitioned. And I'm like, well, why am I doing all of this? And then I really began to delve more deeply into spirituality and into what is all of this. And I went quite the other way, where I actually gave away a lot of my possessions, and I really went into that kind of humility of simple living and understanding myself in that space. And it's interesting because now I've gone a bit more the other way, and I'm looking for what the balance is for me, authentically for me, as a middle-class woman in her 40s who lives in Melbourne, who's not living on an ashram, or who hasn't moved to India or Bali yet. Maybe I will, but for now I haven't, And so, yeah, it really touched me then. And even now, I process things in real time, and I don't have a poker face, fortunately or unfortunately. So when you saw my surprise at court here, that, being here, that was genuine. And when you saw me processing the story again, just then when Court shared it, that was really genuine. It's all the parts of me going, yeah, what do I believe now about surrendering and letting go of our possessions, versus having an attainment or a milestone of success. And I'm evolving and learning in this moment.
Thanks for all of those things. Dr. Dave has finally found his way to the podcast now too, so we can all say hi. Now we look like the Brady Bunch on the screen.
Wow, yeah.
Dave, what do you think about when you hear that story?
Well, it's something I'm struggling with personally. I tend to be a maximalist. I have collections of things, and I'm feeling the weight of the clutter. So I'm probably at a point where I'm going to start downsizing some stuff and trying to live a bit more simply.
Yeah, I'll tell you who's in the simple mode right now is Cortney McDermott. I mean, she is, about as light as it gets. I think I asked her yesterday, I was like, so you just have like 4 suitcases and that's kind of it? Like, so speak to that, Court, because you and I, our common through line is that we both had crazy, big, successful lives, and they drove us crazy. And at the height of it all, I'm sure you had all of the things. And now you choose to have almost none of the things. And I'm wondering what shift has taken place in your own mind and your own heart and your own soul based on simplifying and becoming a little bit more minimal.
I'd say it's recognizing that I have all the things. I absolutely have all the things. Yeah. And it's that moment too that you realize that anything you give up, you can instantly get back when you want it and when you need it and when it's needed, actually. And it's that liberation of yourself from yourself, right? Which we've talked about so many times in our podcast episodes, which we have many, and that Debbie and I talked about together. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
So how do you think other people then, and this is up for debate for anybody, how can other people step into that? How do they step into that letting go process while also landing on this idea that they're not letting anything go because they already have it? I know, nobody wanted that.
I'm like, the answer. There's a story of a man named Brady. No, I'm just joking. I think that, I can obviously only speak for myself. And I definitely have had moments where I really feel that in terms of what Court is sharing around let it go when it comes back. I feel for me that, I think it's a process because you can get stuck in the programming of, school drop off and working and being around people. And I think there's moments where you have decisions to make where you're like, I'm just going to let all of that go and just really trust and that full surrender. And I definitely have had moments where I have experienced that. And that is the truth of who we are, because we are not the mind. We are not the body. We're not. Yet at the same time, this reality is so deliciously real in so many ways that we can get back into I call it spiritual amnesia. It's like where you have these memories from being on a retreat or a ceremony or something that you've done to access that part of you. And then to be able to come back home and live that. I know I've stayed in that space for a few weeks and then I tend to kind of dip back out of it. And I wish I didn't. I could pretend that I didn't, but I do. I go back into whether you call that your ego or your lower self or those parts of you, and everyone's language around it is different. But that's why I love these kinds of conversations, and I love my podcast, and I love all of this because we get to remind each other of those parts of us that might temporarily forget and suffer, as I call it, spiritual amnesia.
I have a question that's burning through me right now because, okay, we've got, Debbie and Cortney and then me, but then Dave down here, right? Like this psychiatrist who's trained completely different than some of the stuff that we're talking about right now. And I always wonder, Dave, like what goes through your mind when I start getting all like, we're of the body and the mind and the spirit and its energy and the flow. Like, I just wonder what you think about.
No, my background is very traditional, right. and I'm listening patiently, because I think that there's still a lot that I have to learn about some of these things. Because again, it's not part of my formal training.
Yeah, that makes sense. So and that's kind of what I was wondering. I was like, does he sit here and is he like, would they shut the fuck up about all this? Or is he like, this is really interesting. Like I find myself kind of leaning in. So that's why I wanted to ask that question. Well, Cortney, anything you'd like to say or do or ask? I mean, I don't want to keep you. I mean, you're totally welcome to stay, but it's if you got things to do, you got things to do.
I was thinking we need to do the jingle of the Brady Bunch, obviously. I mean, Debbie started it. It didn't go anywhere. Now, peace out to everyone. This has been fabulous. Debbie, you're remarkable. Dr. Dave, you as well. It's glad to actually see you here. I've heard a lot about you. And Mathew as well.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a chance to formally meet on a podcast.
Now we have, yes. Yeah.
Well, what if I bring Cortney back? Because I can see that happening in the future. And then, Dave, we bring you on that episode.
Let's do it.
So you're not going to be able to surprise me now. You realize that, right? I mean, the surprise factor is completely gone at this point. But
don't you worry. I'll find a way to surprise you. Don't you worry.
I know. You will. Okay. You'll do the wizard face again.
That's exactly right.
Right. Everyone get ready for it. Okay. Mathew, you are phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm going to bounce because I got stuff today, but thank you. And
you're the greatest.
Keep doing all this fabulous. Keep shining, people.
Okay.
It's really fabulous to be here.
Thanks for working this into your day.
Ciao, belli.
Right. See you later. One of my favorite people there. I've probably done more podcasts with Cortney McDermott than anybody.
Oh, she's the best. I'm still like, did that happen? Did you actually? My mind was like, wait, is she live? Is this pre-recorded? What's happening right now? And when you hear my story, you'll understand why surprises are a little bit interesting for me. I'm sure Dr. Dave can share more about that.
We can get into that. We can get into that a little bit because, typically on our podcast, we don't start with a surprise ambush from somebody that you've been on the show with. We start with the first 10 years of people's lives, and we get a sense for who they are and where this all started and where that original bit of wiring came from. And so let's jump in. Let's go into the deep end of your childhood and help us understand a little bit of the way you were raised.
Yeah, wow. Well, it's interesting. There's almost two versions, because there's the one that I wanted to believe, and then there's the one that was really part of the truth of what was actually going on. So my grandparents on my mum's side were in World War II and went through, murder, genocide. Our family was murdered and persecuted. And so that was not ideal for a child to be born into that. And that child was my mother. And then there was my older brother, 4 years older, and then myself. And I remember I loved my mother dearly. I remember a lot of smothering and controlling. But I also remember, there were undertones of genuine love and care. She was, mum was that mum that was almost like an auntie or a mum to everyone. She held that nurturing, mothering quality. And so there was always a hug and a kiss and always, I love you and you're amazing. And so all of that was there. And so, there was a sense of great emotional support. But what was interesting for me anyway, because it's a very different story for my brother, but there was very clear distinctions between boys and girls, men and women. And I remember being taught how pretty I was and how important it was to be pretty and how important it was to get married and how important it was to do and shut up and to be and all those things. And so, I inherently, like I think most kids, I wanted to please my mum. I wanted to please my parents. My dad, for various reasons, wasn't emotionally on the scene. He struggled with mental health challenges. And I actually thought Dad left at one point. And so essentially it was sort of this very loving, very held environment, but it was also drenched in deep fear and anxiety and overwhelm and control. And I'm also, as you know, hence I do what I do, call me an empath, call me an intuitive. Some people call me psychic. I also have the gift of mediumship. I don't use those things in my job unless I feel it's going to help my client. If something comes through and I feel I have to share this, I'll bring it in. If I feel like it's going to re-trigger or re-trauma someone, I'll just go, thanks for that piece of information, wherever it's coming from in the ether, and I let you go. But it's a very interesting combination when you come into this physical body, which I did as a very intuitive person who can essentially read the room. So very high EQ. And I thought everyone lived on that same plane. And it turns out that they don't. We've all got different levels of IQ and EQ and social, I think there's an SQ as well. So essentially, yeah, a lot of love, but then undertones of something. Now, I would have panic attacks even as a young one. I missed a lot of school. I was very bullied. I was very teased. I did have friends as well, but it was my world was very small. I didn't trust people. I really had sort of a handful of people there. And then I want to pretend like things got good for me. But honestly, Mathew and Dr. Dave, they really didn't. Life was really, I don't want to say unkind, but life was really interesting for me in the relationships I then had, and the trauma and abuse that followed in my adult years, and the loss of 6 people in my life, 6 very close. One, my mother; another, my grandmother; another, a past, I can't even call him a partner, but a person in my life that I loved at the time, who was a deep predator and abuser that's come out through therapy. And it's taken me many years to unpack that. And then 3 very close dear friends to cancer and heart attack. So what also came out in my 40s through therapy, at a moment where I very nearly took my own life, which I've wanted to do many days, even as a very little one. I just felt, I don't want to be here. This is too painful. This is too hard. But there's 2 reasons why I never acted on that. And this is part of why I'm sharing the story of resilience today with your audience, and very grateful to do so, because that undertone of suicidal ideation and not wanting to be here was so strong for me. And it is very strong. I've done a lot of work, family constellations and NLP and heart meditation practices. And I'm an academic. I've got a Bachelor of Behavioral Science, majoring in psychology, minor in philosophy and sociology, and also Bachelor of Social Work. And then I went on to do my NLP and all different certificates and things as well. So I wanted to understand myself, and I wanted to save my mum. That's why I studied psychology. I literally said to her, I'm doing this because I feel like you're going, and I want to save you. And whether that was the psychic part or the intuitive, or just obviously she was not happy. And mum died of gallbladder cancer, holding on to bitterness, if you know about mind and body connection. She was bitter about the loss of, and rightly so, right? She was bitter about the loss of her whole family. And she came into this world through judgment and trauma and abuse from the war that we came from. And that was how my mother was birthed. So she held on to all of those things, and unfortunately I couldn't save her. She was 61. I was 27 and pregnant. I couldn't save her. That's a huge, like, oh my God. And also May is Mother's Day, Mum's birthday, Mum's transition day as well. So when I go to Bali, I was talking with you, Mathew, the reason I go to Bali every May is because I can't be in Melbourne in May. I mean, I can, but it's horrific for me to be in Melbourne in this time of year. So my beautiful life partner, I managed to attract, thank heavens, a beautiful life partner who loves me for me, with all of my quirks and my traumas and my huge heart and my big hair and my inability to take surprises. And he loves me. And we go to Bali, every year, and I can cry and get some sun. There's one more piece in this that I'm going to add, and I know that you were just about to share or ask a question, Mathew. In my 40s, I went to therapy and I realized I'd been through sexual childhood abuse that likely happened from the age of 3 to 6. I won't delve too deeply into it because I've chosen at this time of my life not to unpack who, when, what, how, where. But when I discovered that, and that was the moment where I very nearly did end my life. I was planning it. But I didn't, and I never did, for two reasons. One is I have a son and I love him that much. And the other is I really believe, spiritually speaking, that this life is a gift. And there's a reason why I'm my grandmother's daughter and am a third generation war survivor. That grit and that resilience doesn't happen just because it's within our spirit. And there's a reason, whatever the reason is, I don't really understand it myself, but why I put my hand up to that abuse as a human experience on some level, why as an adult I attracted two predators in my life that took money from me, that took innocence from me, to then eventually in my 40s have my brain clicked in enough with the neuro pathways enough to say, my love, something happened, ask your body. And through therapy, finding out in this incarnation that there was deep trauma and abuse of the worst kind for a child to go through. And that explains the panic attacks and the running into the arms of wolves. And so my story of resilience is also one of beauty, because my grandmother, having gone through what she went through, wasn't just a gritty, resilient woman. She was one of the most beautiful women that you would ever have met. And I'm not talking about physical beauty, despite my mother teaching me how to do my hair and look pretty. And maybe mum was also meaning something else. But my nana had a beauty of her heart, that she was able to live into her 80s and remarry and remarry 3 times, because her husbands all kept passing away, sadly, and be able to smile every day. And so, yeah, my story is resilience, but it's also of inner beauty.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there's so many places that we can jump in there, and thanks for sharing it all. And you and I have more in common than you probably know. I mean, Debbie, we don't know each other all that well. And, I have 3 or 4 things in your story that are pretty much what I went through too. So here's what I want to ask. And Dave, I want to give you a chance to kind of comment on what she said here in just one second. But if you don't, well, actually, let me go to you, Dave, and then I'm going to ask Debbie that question. So give me your downloads on that.
There's a couple of things that jumped out at me, Debbie. When you're talking about generational trauma, especially like war, people who survive through wartime, what gets passed along to the children and even the grandchildren is that fear that they experienced during the wartime. You assume growing up that the world is a safe place. Most people that don't have a traumatic childhood assume that the world is a safe place, and there's a vague conceptualization of dangers being out there, and you assume, and rightly so, that terrible things happening are rare events, and so a lot of people don't worry about them. When you've lived through it, something that's supposed to never happen happens. So now it's not a rare event because it happened to you. And so sometimes that anxiety or the way that a parent or grandparent compensates for their traumatic experience, the compensation, or it's almost like the institutionalized coping, anticipating potential dangers that may never arise, or being fearful of things that may or may not be threats, that then gets transmitted to the next generation as a conditioned response. And so you don't even know why you're afraid of things. You were just told, stay away from this, worry about this, don't trust this. And so that can create anxieties or uncertainty or hesitation to do things that should be easy to engage with or enjoyable. And then when you throw on top of that childhood trauma, actual experience trauma from such a young age, from 3 to 6 years old, you don't really have words to explain what you've experienced. And so a lot of that anxiety happens automatically, and you couldn't describe it to somebody if they asked you to put it in words, because when it happened, there were no words available to describe it. And so I see sometimes, a lot of times, people have panic attacks and they can't explain why they're having a panic attack. Well, a lot of times there's something in the experience that's triggering some of these early anxiety experiences, and they come up involuntarily. And then there's all the compensatory behaviors around trying to manage with that. You know, when anxiety attacks come on out of nowhere, you have to find ways of dealing with it. And that can lead to some pretty interesting solutions, especially as a young
Dave,
person.
I feel like you walked me beautifully to exactly where I kind of want to go next with Debbie. And so I experienced a series of panic attacks as an adult, Debbie. And here I am in the emergency room for the third and final one. Of course, like every idiot, I went to Instagram to tell everybody my story. For very good reason. But at any rate, I had realized that I was suffering from these panic attacks based on a set of belief systems that I had developed growing up through my traumatic experiences. Having a very, very challenging relationship with my mom is a good way to put that in our childhood. Having an alcoholic father who died when I was 23 years old in my arms. I tried to save his life and I couldn't. And so he physically died in my arms. And here's what I wanted to ask you. When that happened with me and my father, when I went through that really traumatic experience, it set up this belief system in me that I didn't know enough and that I wasn't useful. And I didn't know that. I didn't really understand that. But that program kind of kept playing out in my adult life. And then the relationship that I had with my mom set up this other set of belief systems in me. And the easiest way that I can explain it is my relationship with my mom was one where it was like, I love you, I love you, I love you, boom. I love you, I love you, I love you, boom. And as I like to tell everybody, like, my mom was great. She was super loving and she was super kind. But nobody's in therapy because they got too many hugs. So right? And the truth of the matter is that I developed a set of belief systems that I was carrying through that experience with her. And that's what was causing my panic, was I was seeing it in so many other areas of my life. I was like literally freaking out over all of it. So I'm wondering, and this is a long ass way of asking you this simple question, which is, what were some of the beliefs set up within you based on some of those experiences that you've had the pleasure, notice the word choice, of unraveling?
Oh, that's such a good question. It's interesting. So I know I've mentioned this a few times now, but it's obviously so important as part of the journey. But, you know, a huge part of it was, you know, the belief that you have to look a certain way. And I actually traced that back to a story that my nana would share, or that I interpreted, because a lot of it also, of course, is our interpretation of the stories, right? Of Nana being like lined up basically as to who's going to go in which direction. And they didn't know at that time it was to live or to be murdered. And the story goes, my Nana was this, you know, very beautiful 16-year-old. And they said, oh, this one's a good one. Like this is a pretty one. And so she survived. And like, oh my God, to hear that as a young girl, I literally, and even now I'm like, oh my God, is my hair okay? Well, and it's like I joke about it now, but it's not funny. It's like, it was literally life or death. If my hair is out of place, if I don't look a certain way, if the boy doesn't like me, if I'm not the prettiest girl in the room. And I've since discovered many women have this, even aside from going through war, or a family that's been through war or not. But it's that the social, the social conditioning, I guess, around a woman looking a certain way from the 50s and Hollywood, and I'm sure it's before that as well. But that was definitely one that's been interesting to unpack. And now I know it's complete BS, because I'm far more than my hair and my makeup and everything else. And also, I will survive. You know, I will be able to emotionally and physically and mentally survive if I don't have my face on, which was part of why I liked also doing my meditation practices and living on an ashram and not having a hairdryer and going, Deb, sit in that space. Like, look, it's actually okay, you know. But that's been huge for me. The other one is, which I think we all have this, I think this is universal, and I'm sure Dr. Dave can add more to it, but it's that deep feeling of, I'm not enough. I didn't do enough. And Mathew, you also touched on this with your dad. You know, it's like when you're trying to save a parent, and then they literally die. You know, in your case, Mathew, and I'm so deeply sorry that you had to experience that. Wow. You know, for you, it was in your arms. And for me, it was, I'm there carrying life in my belly, 4 months pregnant, and mum's in palliative care. And I was 27, but I'll be honest, emotionally, probably more like a 12-year-old because of what I'd experienced, but didn't know I'd experienced it. So that feeling of I'm not enough was then translated into, let me help everybody. Let me love everybody. Let me do everything for everybody else. And then coming to a point of completely just literally dropping and just, I could not function. And that's when I realized you need to do more work. And I've already done so much work on myself, but it's never ending. I'm a work in progress. And then, you know, realizing around the patterning with the men in my life and the attraction of the abusers and constantly seeking intimacy. You know, I'm not enough. So I don't feel my body. I do now, but back then I didn't feel my body. I was completely out of my body, which we know is a trauma response. And so in order to feel something, I would have these relationships. And I, you know, without any judgment, I'm not a nightclubbing, drinking, sort of drug taking kind of a girl. I'm a let's sit down and meditate and connect and talk. That's more me. So I would have these, you know, breakup, next one, marry, divorce, next one. Like, I've never met a woman that's had so many relationships. Why? Because I'm not enough. I'm not enough is that belief, until I realized you are more than enough, actually. You are more than enough. Stop giving to everybody else. Give that love to yourself. Feel yourself. Feel your own body. Feel this inside of here. And then you can share that. And that's where now this healthy, functional relationship, nothing's perfect, but functional, healthy relationship finally in my 40s is here. So 2 beliefs. I'm not enough. And I'm never pretty enough, or the physicality keeps me alive along those kind of lines.
Okay, so Dave, I'm going to give you a chance to jump all over this. I just want to give a little preview to the audience. So in a moment, what I want to ask Debbie to talk about, and Dave, you're going to be an important piece of this too, is, you know, the reason that I do this podcast is because I'm hoping that somebody listening right now is going, holy shit, me too. Like, oh my God, me too. Right? And they're having all these amazing connections with Debbie's story. And so what's going to be important, we'll spend the next 20 minutes kind of talking about that, is how then does somebody get aware that it's impacting their lives and then start to cycle out of it? She uses a couple of different things. A holistic ecological check, which I want to talk to her about. The 6 selves is something she talks about. So Dave, all of that's on the way, but we'll back up a little bit. So when you hear her and the set of beliefs that gets set up in her, what are you thinking about?
Underlying every panic attack is this belief that it's life or death. And it's in the background. It's not something that people consciously think about. But what drives the intensity of that anxiety and that panic attack is that fear of, if this doesn't work out, you know, certainly death is going to be on the other side of it. And so the reason why I mention that is, you know, people eventually figure this out through different means. And Debbie, it sounds like you've gotten a handle on this for sure. When you realize that, well, first of all, I don't know anybody who's ever died of a panic attack. And I don't say that to be, you know, flippant about it. It's a reaction to something, and your brain subconsciously is telling you that you're going to die, but you won't. And then when you realize that it's this fear of life or death that's driving the panic attack, in the calmer moments, you can kind of take a step back and say, well, wait a second. If I don't have everything squared away, if my hair is a mess, or if I have to run out and things aren't 100%, it'll be okay. It's not life or death right now. And sometimes just the act of saying that is enough to disengage that motor that kind of drives up the anxiety. And it's something that can be practiced over time. You know, maybe it's not something that you automatically fall to, certainly not at the beginning. But as you kind of recognize that pattern and see in very predictable places that anxiety starts to drum up and it starts to turn to panic, you can try to get ahead of it a bit by reminding yourself that it's not life or death. It's not life or death if this doesn't go through. that also goes back to some of the wartime things where, it's interesting for your grandmother, being pretty was a matter of life or death. So now that becomes institutionalized, and those patterns become ingrained because there was a time when that was true. It's not true most of the time, right? But then that gets passed on, and the attachment to what it originally started is long erased, is long gone.
Well, I want to encourage everybody to stop over to debbiezita.com, and you can put up an email address, and you can get this thing right here called 9 Reasons Not to Do It, Rapid Change. And it's in that little pamphlet that I picked a couple of things up that I thought we should spend some time talking about this, because I really do love the way that you have, rolled this out for people. And as I like to say on every podcast episode, I think everybody is literally a sequence of words away from just all of it making sense. Like somebody says something to us, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, that's it. And it becomes the thing. And so what makes sense for you to talk about first, Debbie, knowing your system a lot better than I do? The 6 selves or the holistic ecological check that you talk about?
It's a really good question. Okay, I'll start with the 6 selves. So the 6 selves is a model of self-inquiry. So for anyone, it's self-explanatory, but self-inquiry is the act of going within and inquiring, why am I thinking this? Why is this happening? Where is this coming from? Not to the point of obsession, of course, but just from that place of gentle reflection. So I myself was doing that throughout all of this process. And I was also doing that with my clients. I was asking them questions to ponder on. And I began to realize there were these specific areas that I was working on with women. It was spirituality, it was their emotions, it was their legacy, it was their purpose, it was who were there around, which I call your ecology. And it was valuing yourself and sexual and creative expression. They just kept coming up. And so a few years ago, I went into prayer, and I went into meditation, and I was inquiring, well, there's something here. I can feel how potent and powerful this energy is, this something that I'm working with people. I know it already exists in the world. I know people have been doing therapy and inquiring and all sorts of things, but this is mine. And how can I make this flavor be my own? And I cried and I prayed, and I was asking for an answer to show me how to make this easy to explain. And I sat with that question for a few months. Actually, it wasn't a one-time thing. But there was one moment where I was in my kitchen late at night where I was going, please just show me what this thing is. Give me something clear. And then I had this physical reaction. And maybe, Dr. Dave, you can share what was happening psychologically, because I don't know it as anything other than something spiritual and profound, almost like dropping in through my whole body, which sometimes I call a download. And I realized a voice came to me, whether it was my own or something else. It's the selves, SELVES. And I was like, wait a second, SELVES, the spiritual self, the emotional self, the legacy self, the valued self, the ecological self, the sexual creative self. I wept because it felt like 20-something years of therapy and training and everything I'd been through. That was before I found out about the childhood abuse. But that moment was an, oh my God. So then I went and I registered that to make sure that was actually my own. And you have to agree, it's so beautifully simple that the 6 selves and everything that it stands for is so clean and just it's sexy. It's easy to understand. It is also extraordinarily deep. These are not just words that I'm using in a sexy acronym. Every part of them is meant to bring us to a place of deep understanding and healing. And there's a reason why I start with the spiritual self, because for me, the spiritual self was understanding myself beyond form. And so I know that that's not an intellectual exercise. We cannot get to that place of understanding by talking about it. This is an experience we go through, and it can be an experience such as what I've been through, which was retreats. And I'm not talking a weekend retreat. I'm talking 10 years of spending time with a teacher in thousands of hours of different regressions and understanding specifically the spiritual heart, which is our center of kindness, compassion, and unconditional love, and coming to a place of really experiencing what it feels like to be love. That was the experience of spirituality for me. But for others, it can be yoga, it can be mindfulness, it can be a silence retreat, it can be a trip to India. That's my version. It's whatever it is for you. as we move through it, we go through, the emotional self, which is all around our beliefs and our conditioning, your legacy, which is about your purpose, why you here, valued self, which is a huge thing I'm working on at the moment. I myself have built my coaching practice to 6 figures per year, which is for me very minimum, but also I'm very proud of that. And I've managed to maintain that for 6 years. Interesting that the number 6 is there. Side note, the abuse happened at between 3 and 6. So on an unconscious level, 6 is a very meaningful number for me. So I'm now in my 6th year building my 6-figure business. So that's 600K. And I'm now scaling that so I can work out how to create multi 6 figures and have more time with my son and put more back into my business and more into advertising and marketing and everything else. And I want to add here, it's important for a woman who almost ended her life because she wasn't pretty enough or didn't have what she thought she needed and went through all of that, to receive 100K per year and grow that is massive. So any woman or man listening who thinks you're not worthy, if I can do this and learn how to receive money, and money's a great thing to practice receiving. Sorry, spiritual folk, I love you, but we do actually need money while we're on this planet. If you can receive that, you're giving yourself a great healing in that process. Then we move to ecology, which is what you were talking about, the ecological check, right? We actually, when we're evolving and changing, we do change the people that we're around. We know that we're the sum of the 5 people that we're around, or so we're told, right? At the same time, though, if you just go on a Wednesday, see ya, Nancy, Jerry, Sally, whoever, bye, bitches, and you just leave, you are cutting out your entire social connection, your identity, all of those things in one day just goes. Now, I do know people who do that. There are a few entrepreneurs who are risk takers who vibe off of that feeling of just letting everything go. If you're someone like me who's been through trauma and don't like surprises, I would suggest that on the Wednesday or whatever day you decide to do this after a therapy session or a coaching session or I love you, but an Anthony Robbins workshop, please make sure that you're doing this in a way that is okay with your ecology. And it might take you a full year or a full week or a month to just gently back away and have some boundaries with Sally, Nancy, Jerry, whoever's in your system, while you are bringing in new people into your system. And this is so critically important for our growth and our evolution psychologically and spiritually. Sorry, yes, Matthew, you're going to ask a question.
Yeah, no, I just feel like I have to jump in a little bit because when I went through my major transition, Dave, I don't even know if you and I have talked about this before, but when I went through my major spiritual transition with my buddy Troy, this is Troy, everybody. He was my guru, the guy that kind of helped me understand that I was this transitional character in my lineage. But he kept saying something to me over the 5 days that I was working with him. He kept saying, you have to move in the highest way. You have to move you and your family through this in the highest way. You don't get to be reckless with this. And it's kind of a little bit of what you're talking about. It's this idea that, yes, feel free to make a change for you in your life, but you don't get to be the Tasmanian devil and just come in and explode it. And I was really fortunate, right? I was able to, I think, communicate to the people around me what I needed in a way where they were supportive, and everybody agreed that we would slow down, scale down, simplify, try this new thing out and see, what happens. But I love that you put this element in your framework because you're right. People can get so damned excited about it that they just go hog wire. And Dave, I'd even like to hear what your thoughts are on that, because I know through the people that you've served, and Dave has worked with a lot of veterans over the last 20 plus years, Debbie, that you've seen people, they finally get to their like hands up, like we're done. Like I'm tornadoing this thing.
Yeah. You have to value the people that are valuable to you and preserve those relationships. But I think it is also good to get some time away. And as I'm getting older, I'm seeing more and more the value of taking time just for quiet, prayer, meditation, because my experience is that God never yells at you or yells to you. The only way you get spiritual guidance is in the quiet moments. And when you ready yourself to receive it, when you're in a position where you're you're not distracted by everything that's going on during the day and all the things that you have to do later on, and you just sit and kind of allow things to unfold. That's where the creativity comes in. That's where the new ideas come in. That's where the new direction comes in. When you're looking for it, but you're quietly waiting to take it in and receive it. That's when it comes.
I love that. God doesn't yell. And it's in the quiet moments that we hear it all. That's precious. Getting back to your system, Debbie, you were talking about the ecological components, and on your website, you kind of frame it like you move too soon, you move inappropriately, or you freak out. So do you want to add any more color onto that before you move on to the final S?
Yeah. Thank you. And also, Dr. Dave, thank you for that beautiful sharing. Anything to do with God, especially spoken in that way, I felt it, and I just wanted to honor that. And also wanting to honor the work that you do with veterans. I'm currently reading The Body Keeps the Score. And I think it's just, it's taken me a few years to get to even read it because of my own story. Yeah. But thank you for the work that you do, and for anyone who works in that space. I think it's hugely important that we honor people that have been through that journey. Okay, so Mathew, over to what you were sharing in terms of the ecology. Please remind me of the question again. Sorry, it was around.
It's fine. It's totally fine. And by the way, I do a lot of emotion code work, and I love it, and I highly recommend it. I have released so many trapped emotions through the emotion code work, which is based on that book she's talking about. No, I was suggesting that we were in the ecological check, and you were talking about the idea that you can move too soon, something you called excited entrepreneur syndrome, move inappropriately, or freak out, and then you can share with us the final S in the Selves.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really taking the time to pause before we make those decisions. So we can often be in that elevated state from a retreat or from a workshop. And that's an amazing place to be in, because we're powerful in that space. But I think we're often also not thinking about the whole picture and the future timelines of what our actions are about to create for us. So just be able to pause and reflect. And even I'm thinking, the only time that we might actually sort of cut and run is if it is a toxic relationship, where we come to understand that it is actually abusive and that we need to leave. And I don't know enough about this, and maybe Dr. Dave can add to it, but I think even then there's a way that we can do it that is more respectful. I think the cutting and run is really the last resort, when you've done everything and you just know, look, I can't do anything else. I have to leave this friendship, this partnership, this whatever it is. But everything else, I think, that, in my humble opinion, requires more respect than that, and just some gentle care and thought before we take the next move.
Yeah, I think if it's less than physical abuse, where your life actually is in danger, you can pause for a second and try to figure out what's going on, and maybe if the relationship is valuable, try to set some boundaries and try to see if there's some way to, get some dialogue going with the situation. Because Mathew, you said this before, hurt people, right? So a lot of times people that are abusive in the relationship may not realize that they're being abusive. I mean, if they're a narcissist, that's one thing, but sometimes people react out of their own hurt, and it hurts other people. So I think it's worthwhile giving some space to see if that's the situation. And, coming off of retreats, that's another interesting thing. Sometimes you're on the high of, all this creativity and all this enthusiasm and all this excitement. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. I'm going to, put this in place right away and start off on this, and then you start rolling down a path and then realize that, it's kind of half baked and you don't have all the things in place that you need. And then you can slip into depression after that, because you get discouraged because you went running and then hit a wall. So I think, if you're coming off of a retreat, journal a lot, write things down, write down your thoughts and your feelings, and kind of sit with it for a bit, and maybe come back to it in a couple of days and see if you still feel the same way about it, and start fleshing out some of those ideas so that you can develop a solid longer-term plan that's sustainable and incorporates the other people in your life that are important to you. And I think it ends up being more successful when you do it thoughtfully and planned out.
You might be right about that, but there is also this idea that when you get to a place where you're like finally ready to make a change and you have that momentum kind of build up in yourself, like moving on it, right? And not slowing down and actually like putting more fuel in the fire and saying this is what has to go. And so I think it's a yes and, right? I see the value in pausing and doing things the right way.
Right.
And then I also see the value in like, giddy up, let's get going and let's get this thing moving right
and
along.
this is interesting.
Well, I wouldn't jump in, sell a house, move into a tent out in the desert, like big upheaval type of things that are hard to recover from. I would say, hold on.
Got it. What were we going to say, Debbie?
This is the interesting thing about being an entrepreneur as well. And this is where it's been such a fascinating, I guess, area for me to play in, which is that I'm right in that marriage of, business, entrepreneurship and spirituality. So it's that dance between go, hustle, move, play. And like I can't generate 600K just by, sitting and namaste and praying. Like I have to have sent the emails and sent the invoice and made the sales calls. And, you have to do things. So I think as an entrepreneur, and it's different. If you're not an entrepreneur and we're talking emotions and spirituality, that's a beautiful conversation. But if you are an entrepreneur and we're talking emotions, spirituality, and also business, yes, Mathew, absolutely. You have to be able to be in a space where you go, we've made this decision and please just go and follow that momentum and keep going. And as things arise, hopefully you have the tools and the resources to navigate those obstacles, because you will have obstacles as an entrepreneur. Despite anyone seeing things on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook that you can be an overnight success and it takes this and that. And part of what I'm here to do is also say, well, some people perhaps maybe, I don't want to have any limiting beliefs here, but for many of us, myself included, it can take some time. And I know I've failed way more times than I've succeeded. And that's part of that resilience and grit piece of my story is I'm not going anywhere. This is what I'm here to do. So whatever the obstacles are, I'm not going to say bring them on because I think that the universe kind of hears us, but I'll just say it's okay. I will overcome those obstacles and I will use them to strengthen me and learn from them. And so the sexual creative self is the last piece of the framework. And so what that one is about is all about creation. So there were two different conversations I was having with women. And I say women because I predominantly work mainly with women. But it was around, the sexuality in terms of orgasmic juiciness, embodiment, loving yourself. But it was also equally around creating your podcasts and your books and your programs and literally going into creation mode and executing on that. And so that's the entirety of the framework, from spirituality right up through to the sexual creative self. And I would suggest, again, starting with spirituality, but we can dip into any of the other selves at any time, depending on, where we're at in our lives and our businesses.
I feel like there's so much more that we could get into, but in the spirit of time, we're going to wind down. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Dave, I feel like, so many great nuggets from you today. And like I said up front, I think, if everybody's a sequence of words away from some shit making sense, there were a lot of things said today that could help people go, okay, I get it now a little bit more than I used to. We've had this.
There's another thing, if I could
sure.
jump in. Part of the benefit of doing mindfulness and reflecting on the direction that you're going and trying to envision what the future is that you want for yourself, when those opportunities come up, you're in a better place to recognize something important and to be able to make that impulsive decision to go forward with it. Because that decision, what looks like an impulsive decision, wasn't actually impulsive. It was something that you were generating in your mind and planning for maybe months prior. And just when the right situations lined up and the right circumstances lined up, and you had that conversation with that new person that kind of brought that other piece in that you were missing, when everything comes together, then it's time to move. And you can move forward confidently. Again, not because you made an impulsive decision. And I think that's kind of the contrast to sometimes when people are dealing with traumatic situations, they get into a mindset of needing to escape from a situation, but they're not necessarily running towards something better. They're just trying to get out of a bad situation. And that can create a lot of upheaval and chaos in your life if that's how you're responding to things. But the mental work, the mindfulness and the thinking and contemplating and preparing puts you in a situation where when the situation's right, you can jump on it and be confident.
Love it. The podcast is called Playing the Big, Beautiful, Long Game. There's a series of books. You can go to DebbieZita.com, and there's a couple of different downloads that she offers. What do you talk about on your podcast, Debbie?
So it's really the story of life and business and how we move through the obstacles, our mindset, the strategy. And I love sharing and learning from other people, because I think we're still missing that level of authenticity and realism on social media around what it takes to really navigate trauma, to really actually build a sustainable business. And this is part of what playing the big, beautiful, long game is. So playing big is your next level, whether that's 6, 7, 8 million, whatever the figures are for you that brings you that level of success. Everyone's different. And beautiful for me is the heart. It's who we are at our core. It's our essence. And it doesn't mean as much to me if I'm playing big, but I'm not also playing beautiful.
Who do you prefer to work with? Who's your ideal client?
So it's women over 40 who are at a crossroads, and it can be in life or business. And they're really looking to marry that business, career, finance with a level of deep spiritual immersion to understand themselves at that essence, at that core level, and live and operate from that space.
I love it. Do you work with men too? Because I'm over here, I'm eating up some of the stuff you're putting down. This sounds pretty good.
Thank you. I do. It's a little sad, but the fact is, because of what I've been through, I've had to have, and I'll say it because it shouldn't be this way, guys. So Dr. Dave, Mathew, you seem like lovely, nice men. If you ever catch a guy who's in a patterning of toxicity, can you please call him out? Because women like me shouldn't have to not feel safe and comfortable to work with men because of what we've been through. And so for that reason, I do work with men who I've been referred to by my existing clients. So obviously either of you, I've met you through Court. I love Court. I trust Court, no issues. But it shouldn't have to be that way, right? It should be that we live in a world where we feel safe to be able to connect with men and women in the public domain, even after we've been through abuse. But yes, Mathew, I would love to chat to you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I used to say, I used to work a lot in the domestic violence space, and I used to say to women when I would talk to them, I'd say, if you see me walking down the street, you don't need to worry about me. The only thing you need to know is I will protect you as fiercely as your father would have. And, I think there's a lot more men that operate that way than don't, but, nobody's in therapy because they got too many hugs, right? We're not here to talk about all the good things that happen. There's a few things that happen that were bad. Dave? Yeah.
From my experience, sadly, the folks that are most likely to be that way don't ever go to therapy because they're not the problem.
They're not the problem.
And that's a classic narcissistic response, right? That's the... And I don't know how we get past it. Maybe that's another podcast episode. How do we can't change that social dynamic necessarily, but I'm a mother of a son as well, right? So I don't want to live in that space where I'm women's empowerment and feminism for me is about the collective consciousness, men and women. Divine femininity is about unconditional love for both men and women. And so I want to see in my lifetime, and I hope that I do, that there is some sort of a shift. And I don't know how, I'm not claiming to know how, but perhaps it's these kinds of conversations for the men or women who are around that behavior who can somehow just plant the seed, and maybe that might change something for us.
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. Well, thanks again. To go all the way back to the beginning really quick, thanks to Cortney McDermott for showing up on the show today. There's a couple of her books that I can highly recommend. I mentioned all the downloads at DebbieZita.com. The podcast is sitting right there, Playing the Big, Beautiful, Long Game. Dr. Dave, appreciate your time and attention as always, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all.
Debbie, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.